Thankful for Justin for sharing the pulpit with me and Doyle asking me, and thankful for you for your attentiveness. You're a very easy church to preach to. I stand in front of you, I'm just impressed with the love and maturity and unity that we are blessed with in our congregation. So it's a delight to be able to speak to you every Sunday for the last 5 weeks. Having said that, I'm glad we're done and I can go back to having my weekends free again. So before we start, let me start with this question. When is it in a relationship when you find out whether the other person is trustworthy? When do we learn we can trust someone? Is it when times are good, marriage is great, kids are great, job is great, health is great? Typically, it's not. It's when times are bad. When the storms are rocking the boat. That's when we really find out whether we can trust someone, if they're going to be there for us, support us, and sacrifice for us, and help us through it. Storms are the great gut check of trust. And because of that, storms are the great gut check of our relationship with God. So when things are good, this God thing is easy. Oh yeah, God. Great job, great money, great wife, great kids, nice boat, nice house. But when the sky darkens and the wind picks up and the waves start coming over the sides, trust takes a beating. And part of that reason is we sort of feel as if God is trustworthy, there won't be storms. Now you may say, I don't believe that. Honest? Don't we, in some sense, feel as if we give our lives to God, we follow His commands, we put on everything that He wants us to put on, and we take off everything He wants us to take off, and avoid that if we do all that, we'll have a blessed life. We'll be prosperous, be healthy. And so when the storm comes, what's the first question we ask? Why is this happening? To be quickly followed by, why is this happening to me? That kind of portrays where we really feel this whole storm and God thing is really at. I should be excused from storms. I should be protected from storms if God is trustworthy. Even though Scripture says just the opposite, even though it says you should expect storms, in fact, you should expect more if you become a Christian, we still feel as if we shouldn't. And so the first question about trust is, are we going to trust God with the storm? We're going to look at Matthew chapter 14 today for our inspirational story. Little background check. This comes at the end of a very, very long day. It's probably the longest day to this point in Jesus' life. He begins the morning of this day with the news that John the Baptist has been beheaded, Jesus' cousin. And so he seeks a private place. He gets into the boat with his disciples. They go to try to find a private place so that Jesus can grieve. Jesus doesn't have that privilege of having alone time. They find out where he is, the crowds, and they follow him. And Scripture says he sees the crowd, and unlike us, doesn't get angry, doesn't get frustrated. It says he has compassion for them. And so he spends the day healing and teaching. And that ends up with the miracle, the feeding of the 5,000. So that's all happened prior to where we began this story. So verse 22 of chapter 14. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. You notice when Jesus shows up, we might be able to buy into this idea that we have storms and that storms can be expected as a Christian. But we still have an expectation that Jesus is going to show up early in the storm. 3 o'clock in the morning is not early in the storm. They've been out there for hours fighting this storm. We want Jesus, okay, Jesus, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m., maybe 8. Not 10, 11, 12, definitely not 3 in the morning. So part of our job, part of our challenge is not only trusting in God in the storms, but trusting his timing in the storms. It's not always going to be early. Let's go on to read 25 to 27. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out with them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." They didn't see him. Actually, technically, they saw him, but they didn't know it was him. They didn't recognize him. They thought he was a ghost or apparition. And so how could they not know it was him? Well, they knew Jesus of the land. They knew Jesus of the city. They were used to that Jesus. They'd seen him healing, and they'd seen him feeding, and they'd seen him raising from the dead, but they hadn't seen him yet walk on water. They had tied themselves down to whatever they had already experienced. And so when Jesus stepped out into a different demonstration of power, they couldn't recognize him. It makes me wonder how often Jesus comes to us in storms and we don't recognize him. We don't see him for who he is. We don't know he's there. Because maybe he's never done that for you before. Maybe it's someone that Jesus is working through that you have never been exposed to before. So let's say you master trusting that God can still be God and be trustworthy in a storm. Maybe you've learned to master waiting through the storm for God. And maybe when he comes, you do recognize him. That's just all the prep for the big game. This is where the real adventure starts for us as Christians, the storms. This is the true test. Let's read 28 to 33. "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." 3 critical parts of this. We have the boat, we have the storm, and we have Jesus. Peter gets out, 11 stay in the boat. Why did they stay in the boat? What are boats? Boats are things that are familiar. Boats are things that are somewhat predictable. We have the storm, very unpredictable, very risky, very unsafe. And even though the boat's taking on water and is unmanageable, it's still what we know. And so we hold on to it. We can see Jesus, but the problem is between the boat and Jesus is a storm. What's going to happen in the storm? We don't know. So we'll stay in the boat. Two things that we notice about Jesus here. One, you notice he doesn't walk right next to the boat where he can be reached. He stands away from the boat in the storm. He has no desire to be a Jesus floaty, standing next to the boat where he can be touched and grabbed onto, and then they can say, okay, I've got you, Jesus, I can step out. He's not having that. Jesus is saying, if you want the trust, I'm going to stand over here. You have to get out of the boat into the storm to get to me. That's where trust is built. Second thing you notice, when Jesus left the land after his prayer time and stepped into the water and the storm was going on, could he have not calmed it? Been a lot easier walking on a nice calm lake. And then when he walks up to the boat, he'd be much more recognizable. It's clear skies, Jesus standing there. Pretty obvious it's Jesus. And would they more likely be willing to step out on a calm lake than a storm-ridden lake? Surely. So what do we learn? We learn that Jesus is not going to make it easy. We don't build trust in smoothness. We don't build trust in God by having no storm. And to expect there to be no storm, it's not biblical. It's not godly. So Jesus keeps that storm going. He stays away from the boat. And when Peter, bless his heart, talk about Peter, I fell in the water. Well, I think we need to throw the other 11 under the bus, not Peter. They stayed in the boat. So the question is, what is our boat? What is your boat? What are we holding on to that's keeping us from Jesus? Because the goal is not to get out of the boat. That's not the goal. We're not seeking to be brave. Let's get out of the boat and get into the storm. That would show our courage. That's not the point. The point is to get out of the boat to go to Jesus. That's the point. Yeah, we got to get through the storm, but the storm, it's just a way to test our trust in Jesus. That's the point. So what is it that we're in that's a boat that's comfortable and secure and safe that's keeping us from answering Jesus' call? Well, there's risk there. There's uncomfortableness there. A lot of things could be a boat. Just as a side, tradition can be a boat. Unexamined doctrine can be a boat. We can sense that Jesus may be calling us to try some different ways, some different forms, to look at Scripture again, make sure what we're doing is what's right. And the test is, the storm is, what if we step out towards what we think Jesus is calling us to do? What will others say of us? What will they write about us? Get out of the boat. Not just to get out of the boat, because that's where Jesus is calling us. That's why. We're going to watch a clip, hopefully, if PJ was able to master this. This is a clip from the series Chosen. This is the last episode of the last season that we watched. This is their rendition of this encounter between the disciples and Jesus in the water. If you've not watched The Chosen, let me warn you, you're going to have dialogue here that's not in Scripture. That's their artistic desire to backfill and to bring a little bit more drama to it. Don't get caught up in that. Just try to understand what's going on between the boat, the storm, and Jesus.
We can't take much more water. We'll founder. Better off wet and cold on land than drowned and dead out here. Don't shoot, Brian. What are you doing? Did anybody just see that?
Can you start over again with closed caption? It's hard to understand the dialogue, especially for us hard of hearing. And then start over again. Thank you.
We can't take much more water. We'll founder. Better off wet and cold on land than drowned and dead out here. Don't shoot, Brian. What are you doing? Did anybody just see that? Over there. Go! 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 Faster! Let's go! Everybody move! Simon, what? I said everybody stop! Stop! Hey, stop! Move! That's not a ghost! Are you crazy? Jesus? Impossible. If it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Simon, no! Are you out of your mind? If you are who you say you are, bid me to step out of this boat. You have the faith to walk on this water? Absolutely. You can do whatever you command. And if you command the water to hold me, I will walk on it. If I told you to me, you would step out in faith? Yes! Then why are you upset? Why are you chasing after Gentiles when your own people have problems right here? When your own person has problems? I've been right here in front of you, believing in you, but you're breaking up fights in the Decapolis? Then come to me, you, weary and heavy laden. I will give you rest. Simon, no. Simon, be foolish, Simon. Simon, wait. Simon, no, Simon. Simon, where are you going? What are you doing, Simon? Stop. Simon. Do you still have faith? Faith hasn't been my problem. I gave up everything to follow you. But you're healing those of strangers. Why do you think I allowed trials? I don't know. They prove the genuineness of your faith. They strengthen you. This is strengthening you. And Eden. Keep your eyes on me. Turn to me, go. Turn to me, go. Oh, you are bitter thief. Why did you not? Now let me go. I have much planned for you, Simon, including hard things. Just keep your eyes on me. I promise.
Love that scene. What did Simon do right? Kept his eyes on Jesus. What I like about that, it clearly shows what he's focusing on Jesus despite the storm he's walking. The minute he takes his eyes off and pays attention to the storm, he sinks. We're going to trust him when there's a storm. Are we going to trust him with the timing of the storm? Recognize him when he comes? Are we going to get out of the boat? Walk to him? Last thing I want to share with you is a quote from John Ortberg, I think is the way you pronounce his name. He wrote a book called If You Want to Walk on Water, You Got to Get Out of the Boat. That's a frequently quoted sentence when it comes to this passage. Inside his book is a quote from another man named Greg Levoy. I have no idea who it is, but he has something that's really applicable to what we're talking about. You have sinful patterns of behavior that never get confronted and changed. Abilities and gifts that never get cultivated and deployed. Until weeks become months and months turn into years. And one day you're looking back on a life of deep, intimate, gut-wrenchingly honest conversations you never had. Great, bold prayers you never prayed. Exhilarating risks you never took. Sacrificial gifts you never offered. Lives you never touched. And you're sitting in a recliner with a shriveled soul and forgotten dreams. And you realize there was a world of desperate need and a great God calling you to be part of something bigger than yourself. You see the person you could have become but did not. You never followed your calling. You never got out of the boat. I don't want to be that, and I don't think. Let's trust in God. In the storm, through the storm, wherever he's calling us. Let's stand and sing.
His smile quickly drives it.